All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to Annapolis for this joint hearing on parole and probation. Obviously, this is a committee that was formed in response to a tragic incident that happened on May 31st, where Officer Martinez was killed. And I want to say, first, before we get started, welcome to the House members. It's good to see you all. And second, and more importantly, just to the, I know members of the Martinez family are here today. I just want to say thank you all for being here, and thank you for your continued engagement and commitment to helping us become a better state. We're going to start off with the Secretary. So, Madam Secretary, come on up at your leisure. This is a follow-up briefing. Obviously, there was a robust dialogue last time around, and obviously, at the end, members and the department felt that there was a need to have another hearing and a briefing to dive a little bit deeper and get a little bit more answers to some of the unanswered questions that came up last time. So with that background, Madam Secretary, the floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon, Chair Smith, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Carolyn J. Scruggs, and I'm the Secretary for the Maryland Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. With me today is Deputy Secretary of Administration Joe Sadal. I also have members of my team in the audience that work directly within the Division of Parole and Probation. Let me first say that it is within the spirit of Agent Martinez that we want to continue to emulate his character within the workplace. That was a character of professionalism, of compassion, and actually a commitment to public safety. And that's why here today we would like to review some of the changes that we have made and our continued progress to ensure the safety of each and every employee within this department. Since our last meeting, we have met in collaboration with our union partners to discuss the vests and what's most appropriate for our staff. We've come to an agreement that the multi-threat vest would be of best use. Starting on December 3rd, we began fitting some 640 agents that we have for that multi-threat vest. As of this morning, over 600 had been completed. Those that have not been done are people that are out sick on FMLA, and we will backtrack and make sure that we get that done. When we met with the union, we also had Atlantic Tactical, who's the manufacturer of the vest, there so that we could discuss approximate manufacturing times and potential implementation. Atlantic Tactical has told us that they will start manufacturing in January, and that is there is approximate 6 to 8 week turnaround. So it is our goal that by early March, the vests can be distributed. Communication was another matter that was brought before this committee. And I am happy to say that we continue to work with our union partners to collaborate in every area. Most recently, December 4th, I met with that team, and I would say that that meeting was very successful, and we were able to accomplish some things and understand that we need to further meet in order to iron out other challenges that we may have. The one thing that came out of that meeting is something that I am very familiar with on the DOC side, where union meetings are held at the warden level. We are now going to ensure that on the DPP side, those union meetings can be held at those lower level supervisory levels so that there is an immediate response to any challenge or need that is had and hopefully does not have to be escalated. So there will be numerous levels of communication going forward with the union. That communication also led to the identification of urgent policies that need to be addressed, employee safety policies. I will tell you that the policies are now in the hands of our partners. The union, they are reviewing them, and within 30 days, they will come back to us so that they can tell us they either agree with that or we can go back to the table to make the necessary amendments for those policies. Caseloads was another topic that was brought before us. The caseload study was due to end in December. It did not. We have extended it through February 2025. However, what I will tell you is that this department and this new administration, outside of that caseload study, took a very, very specific look at each and every individual that we supervise and the caseloads throughout the state of Maryland. And I think that one of the things we found is that many of our efforts from JRA are working, and that there are some agents that had much lower caseloads and in some instances no caseloads. So we will not impact operations, but what we're going to do, when I say not impacts, I mean a negative impact to operations. But what we're going to do is those individuals that did not have caseloads are going to be assigned caseloads. And that is going to allow us to afford opportunity to balance those loads, especially in Baltimore and in the West. So we will be looking at that as we go forward. The new director is already working on that. Hiring was one of the other challenges that came up during the last committee meeting. During that time, we had approximately 40 individuals that we were hoping would be part of the new DPP team. 15 of those individuals will be starting in January. 21 of them are still going through background check. And understand background check is not always because there's a challenge. Sometimes it is held up because that recruit has to provide us documentation. We also have an open and continuous recruitment for DPP agents, and I encourage and ask each of you, if you know individuals within your communities that want to be part of this great team, to please have them apply. Those were the major topics that we had. We're happy to be here before you again. I can't reiterate enough that we are happy to have the partnership that we have now with our union representation, and we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. Do you have any other panelists coming up to present, or are we moving in? All right, excellent. Questions from the committee? Delegate Barnes.
Madam Secretary, good to see you.
Good morning.
It asked you about, you said you needed more pins when you were here last, and I had asked if you had requested those. Have you now made the request in the upcoming budget?
Thank you for that question. Our focus right now is to fill the pins that we currently have. Any request for pins is executive privilege, and once the governor releases the FY26 budget, we're happy to have that discussion with you.
Something like that. Thank you, Madam Secretary. I paused when you said that you have some agents who have no caseload right now. Can you help us understand better how that came to be? What are they doing with their time if they don't have caseloads? And then if it would be very helpful, Mr. Chair, if at some point between now and perhaps your budget hearing, to have a better sense of how you want to rebalance that work.
Thank you for that question. I will start by letting you know that much of that is within our court-ordered our agents, but I would ask that our deputy come up to give you more detailed information pertaining to that. Yolanda? The director will do that.
Good afternoon, everyone. As it relates to our agents that are in non-caseloads, prior to JRA, much of what the time that was spent for agents was in court, particularly within Baltimore City. There was a time prior to 2017, I believe, where the court docket was one court liaison agent would have approximately 500 to 600 cases within a month. Due to some of the changes and things that have taken place, those workloads are down to about 200 a month. So we're able to look at the workload within that particular unit and decide that we can redistribute the work to positively affect our caseload sizes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the Secretary and her staff for coming to this next hearing, and everyone for making the time today. So I have a couple quick follow-ups from the last session we were here that I wanted to ask. So the first was, we had, one of my colleagues over there had a question as relates, and hopefully I'm not stealing his thunder, on body-worn cameras for agents and the like. And I know you were talking about fitting their vests and whatnot. I was just wondering, were there other technology components that folks are getting fitted with, or will there be legislative requests to aid with that?
So exploration of security equipment is ongoing, and we are still looking at best practices across the country, and we will work in collaboration, again, with our union partners to ensure that that is the best fit. So no definitive answer has been provided as far as body-worn cameras.
Okay. Another one was on the, and forgive me if you had already addressed this, but I missed it, was on the phones. So of course, in
The application for the tracking on the phones?
Yeah, are those been activated now?
Yes, sir. The application for tracking on phones has been put onto the phones. The director is still working with our union partners to ensure there is clear guidance as to how that is used, as well as the accountability of those supervisors to ensure that not only is the agent using it, but the supervisor is being held accountable to track that agent as well.
Yeah.
So we'll continue to work with our partners to have that in writing as well.
Yeah, that's appreciated because, I went through some of your documentation on, I guess, the protocol on when someone's out there, they're supposed to check back in periodically, but I imagine a number of the supervisors are also doing work. So if there's a way for them to be prompted so that they know that, like, hey, this person hasn't checked in, I hope that's a functionality.
So I think one of the things that you'll find with this new administration and us further looking into some of the practices is that one of the things that I require from this administration is accountability and pushing that accountability down to lower level supervision and management. That is going to require training because people have not been doing some things that they've been making their own decisions. But we're going to ensure that everyone is trained properly, given those tools, and held accountable for the use of those tools.
Yeah. I appreciate that, and hopefully systems with that says just repetition helps us all. My wife reminds me every day at 4 o'clock to pick up our kids as if I'm going to forget, but it helps. Another thing, and I'll allow my colleagues to opine, is I think last time you were mentioning, or one of your staff was mentioning, these in-house think tanks in really making the workforce a partner. Can you elaborate on how that's going?
Thank you again for that question, and I will let the individuals that have actually been handling those think tanks talk to you about it in detail.
So in.
Tell them who you are.
Oh, sorry, I apologize. My name is Christopher King. I'm the current deputy of operations for DPP. So in July of last year, of this year rather, we began a home visit think tank process to really engage with staff throughout the state to ensure that supervisors, agents, field supervisor twos, really had an input in our policies, and that's something that we expect to keep on doing to ensure that the voice is heard throughout the line of staff.
Okay, that's really important because what we heard in the last hearing was that there were a number of requests that was made on safety and whatnot that was coming up, and seems like it was not reaching the top brass. And part of the structure we're trying to convey here is, of course, we want you meeting with the union partner who represents that voice to kind of meet. I think my phrase was king to king last time, and I meant that. But also so that you can hear from rank and file folks. I know that you all shared policies with the union recently. How long ago were they able to see the updated policies that you guys shared?
Yes, they were all sent to the union on December the 6th.
Okay. All right. So, all right. Well, hopefully they'll have time to process that, and we'll have more time to talk during budget hearings and stuff. But I appreciate you all and your collaboration and following up with us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Were you ahead of me? Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Secretary, nice to see you again. Thanks for coming out. So I just have I didn't think I had that many questions, and then as you continued to speak, I got more questions. You talked about briefly the body-worn cameras. Were they ever considered in your discussions?
So the body-worn cameras were considered on the Division of Corrections side, and there has been an agreement made on the DOC side to implement the pilot.
To implement what?
A pilot and on the
pilot?
a pilot on the DOC
Okay.
side. That pilot's going to be held at Patuxent Institute. On the on the DPP side, there is further conversation that needs to be had with the body-worn cameras.
Have you had a conversation with the people from parole and probation about the cameras?
The union has been involved in conversations about that.
Okay. And the conversation went where?
So let me go to Director.
Good afternoon, Senator Fulton. Yes, we have been in conversations with the union about the body-worn cameras. We've actually had a demonstration of the body-worn cameras, and that's where we are at this point with the body-worn cameras.
The agents had the same demonstration as you guys had? Or you guys, only leadership had a demonstration?
The leadership and the union had a conference with the vendor, actually. We were
Okay.
doing market research, and they were a part of those discussions.
Okay. And then it was brought up about the pens. How many current vacant pens do you have?
Joe, HR. I don't think your mic is on.
That's what the red button's for. For the record, Joe Setatal, Deputy Secretary of Administration for Public Safety. As of now, the current vacancy rate for DPP as a whole is 8%. Within Agent 1's, again, the lowest level as of a week ago, and one thing to keep in mind within any HR process is it's consistently changing as you're moving, hour by hour as you're moving through the recruitment process.
I just need to know the number.
43% for Agent 1's, 1% for senior agents, and 1% for Agent 2's.
43% translates to what number?
62 of 100 and, I believe, 8 are filled.
So 62 are filled out of 108 at Agent 1. And these are the people that are most likely the ones that are handling the caseloads, going to the doors. Is that correct?
Yes.
62 out of 108. And then you said the next level was what, sir?
Agent 2.
And what are those?
112 out of 113 are filled.
112 out of 113. Okay. And Madam Secretary, when you talked about that you'd be asking potentially for more, or that there would be a request because you needed more, how many more pens, like how many total pens do you have in DPP?
Approximately 1,008. Do you know the exact
There are a little
number?
over 1,000, but they're not all agents.
Yeah,
There are
right.
approximately 648 agents.
648 agents? Okay. And did you come up with a number with your team to determine how many additional pens you would need of agents to be able to successfully complete your mission safely?
So again, as I expressed earlier, we are having those conversations. Again, because of budgetary matters associated with them, it is executive privilege, and we will be happy to have that conversation with you after the governor releases his budget.
That's not what I asked, ma'am. Madam Secretary, I asked what number do you think would be an appropriate number for your agents to safely be able to do their job? I didn't ask about executive privilege, not trying to get any inside information. I'm simply asking you as the secretary, how many pens would you need to be able to properly and safely keep your agents safe to do their jobs?
And sir, I would ask that you let us answer that question after the budget comes out.
Okay. I do have so you mentioned that accountability, that you're a big person of accountability, but you had agents with 0 caseloads, as the senator said. How is that even possible?
So one of the things that I think this administration takes pride in is that there was an immediate change in leadership when this tragedy occurred. That immediate change in leadership allowed us to analyze and understand things that were not getting to my office, that were not getting to the top. Understand that it is no longer business as usual for the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. So as we continue to grow, as we continue to explore, we're learning about these things. We are evolving every day. And that's how this new leadership came in. They did a deep dive, and they were able to see some of the challenges where we could realign some things. And that's what we're doing right now.
Okay, so that doesn't really answer my question again. You're saying that you have a new leadership, but in your style of leadership, your accountability, this tragedy occurred. It was May?
May 31st.
You never had a conversation with the union up until the last meeting that we had.
That's not totally true, sir. I have had conversations with members of the union.
Did you have a meeting with all the representatives after your agent was killed?
I was actually at the office the day of the death when the union representation was there. I was at that office that day.
I understand you were at their office. Did you have a meeting with them?
I had conversation with them that day.
So, no. All right, policy modifications. Can we see what policy modifications you're looking to, like, I'm curious from a public safety standpoint to know where I want to see the draft that you had that struck out and the modifications you made to make their job safer. Can we get a copy of that?
And the union does have that information. If that's something that we can share, we'll be happy to do so.
Just more directly, so we can have that, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. And then in July, you said that there was a think tank on the policy mods, but there was no movement on it, from my understanding, until after the meeting,
That's not my understanding.
the last hearing we had.
The think tank that Deputy just spoke of, when did your think tanks begin, sir? Can you?
They began in July of this year.
Yeah, you had a think tank, you said.
Correct.
And there was nothing between the think tank and the hearing that was last time. There was no modifications. And you just handed them off, you said, on December 6th. So 6 months.
There's been more in development since then, but as far as providing the recent drafts to the union, they were provided on December the 6th.
Okay, so you had the after action finally with the union, correct?
Yes.
And from the after action, you've had it since the hearing we had in October. Is that correct?
Yes.
And are you able to tell us, like, I don't, maybe I missed it, I'm sorry, maybe I totally missed it, but what modifications, that's what we want to know. What came from the after action that you guys are working in partnership for the agents for their safety? And I just don't really, I'm not following. I hear a lot of fluff, but I don't see a lot of substance.
The policies.
I would have liked to have had, like, I don't know, something that printed out. This is what we met about. This is what was discussed. These are the actions that we are taking moving forward. That would be a proper after action between the union and leadership.
So we have updated 10 policies, and I can give you a brief blurb on some of the changes that have happened.
If you can just get them to us, like I would have thought I'd like to have seen them.
We will give that to you at another
We can actually
time.
make a copy of this and give it to you.
And the last thing I have is, was there any consideration for arming the agents? Was that ever discussed?
That has been discussed. It's also been discussed with our AG. There are some legal matters that we have to go through pertaining to that, but we'll continue to have those discussions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator. So do you have that immediately available? Because we can make sure, I'll make sure the members of the committee have that information by the end of the meeting.
Yes, sir, we do have that in our notebook and happy to share that with you.
Excellent, thank you. And then just one thing on the PINs issue. I mean, I know the budget's coming out, and we're all well acquainted with the budget situation. So you're not in a position to articulate how many PINs you would like to have or you would need to have?
No, sir, not today.
Okay.
And if I can I provide a little bit of additional context related to the different PINs? Like I mentioned, there were 113 Agent 2s, 108 Agent 1s. When you're looking at senior agents, where I said there's a 1% vacancy rate, we're looking at 437 of those. So I just wanted to say that to provide that additional context when all of these agents are working within these different capacities. The Agent 1s, and it's a non-competitive promotion. I know this doesn't directly answer your question, but again, I'm trying to provide some context on the vacancy issue as a whole.
It would have been great to have like a nice little printout to show. This is what we're asking for, but that's privileged information. But this would make us work more efficiently. Maybe the union will be able to answer that question because they don't have executive privilege concerns.
Yeah, the only reason I'm telling you that is, the agent ones it's a non-competitive promotion, right? So you're looking at like that first year, and then you move up to agent 2, then you move up to agent 3. So
Appreciate that.
With that additional information, 400 agent seniors, we're at a 1% vacancy rate.
Yeah, but it sounds like some of them weren't even doing any work.
So one of the things we're trying to do additionally within, I know the secretary mentioned that we have 15 more people coming in. This open and continuous list, which I think is a great change. We used to have these restricted lists, and I don't know how much y'all want to get into, boring HR stuff. But we have 834 people that are currently on that list. So there's clearly an applicant level or interest. And obviously, one of the things that we do in engaging in a long thought-out process with background is we want to have the best possible in these positions. So when we talk about we get 50 applicants in background and maybe 15 or 20 shake out, that's because we are picking the best and making sure that everyone can do the job and meet their public safety mission.
No, I appreciate that. All right, so I'm going to pivot over to Chair Barnes just for a question about the executive privilege, and then we're going to go to Solomon.
I certainly understand executive privilege. It's something not unfamiliar to us. It's something we heard a lot during the Hogan years, frankly. And thank you for your offer to discuss your budget after the budget comes out. As chair of the Appropriations Committee, I'll let you know we're going to take you up on that. Talk to the subcommittee chair. We're going to move your budget to full committee this year. And then I want to offer to you back, after we finish with your budget, we go first and we send it to the Senate. After you've seen the budget at that point, you're free to come talk to me about it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. All right, we're going to Delegate Solomon next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Secretary, it's nice to see you again. I appreciate you and your team spending so much time with us in the joint audit hearing last week, and appreciate the meeting. I do have to say, I was very pleased to hear, I know we had a vigorous conversation in the last hearing on the vests, and I'm very pleased to hear that we're making substantial progress on that. And that was one of the biggest takeaways in my mind, that we needed to make sure that we had all the safety equipment for our field agents in correct working order. I had just a couple of questions for you, but on the PIN piece, I would just echo the comments of my colleagues. I don't know that I'm really trusting what you're sharing with us, because I'm looking at, so ASME shared this was the notes from your Labor Committee meeting in December, and in the staffing concerns piece, there are notes here that said, on vacant positions, this is around administrative vacancies. It says the agency currently only has 2 vacant office professional positions, despite 4 probation offices without office support staff, and 17 offices missing either an office secretary or an intake worker. So, I mean, again, and this was agreed to from both sides, that information, clearly what's being communicated from your field offices is not necessarily reflective of what we would see in a vacancy report. Can you explain that?
Yeah, to that point, like intake reviewers, right? Again, that's not something when we're just, the conversation so far has been related to agents themselves, right? Intake reviewers is a different classification, a different category. We've actually just posted, I want to say it's closing on December 30th, a new recruitment to try and up our level of intake reviewers. We are aware of what the vacancy rates are for all of them. There are vacancies, there's no doubt. And, I can check real quick and find the exact numbers and get that to you, or give it to you after the meeting. But what I can tell you is we are doing the recruitments to ensure that we have the appropriate administrative staff, because one of the goals is to make sure that any of the agents working in the field are not also doing administrative tasks, right? We want them to be working in their capacity as an agent.
So then maybe there's something wrong, and maybe we can follow up afterwards. But again, you're saying, this is saying you only have 2 vacant office positions, even though there's a total of 21 offices essentially missing those administrative positions.
Yeah, I mean, look, every office is going to be different, right? Depending on the level of caseload, whether an intake reviewer is necessary, depending on how many people are necessarily coming in to take intake. Every office is not necessarily synonymous or the exact same, right? So you're going to see when you're looking at a PIN count, right? It's not necessarily, 5, 5, and 5 across the board on everything, just to give a stupid example.
Right, but I would assume, again, if there's 17 offices missing something, you would want to have more than 2 vacant positions.
Yes, and I think during the LMC, and I would hope AFSCME would agree, I think we had a very productive conversation about that, and these are the kind of information that when brought to a quarterly community supervision LMC, which I imagine is what you're reading off of, bringing that to us allows the department to identify whether changes need to be made and continue to work with them. One of the reasons I'm sitting at this table right now is I'm over labor relations for the department. And one of the things we all really try to do is not wait for meetings, right? We have these scheduled meetings, these quarterly community supervision LMCs, these monthly meetings with DPP. The goal is always, if there is a problem, let us know so we can try to resolve it as quickly as possible.
I'd love to hear that. I guess my only concern on that would be, this seems like there's issues internally in your administration. If you all as senior leaders of the agency are not getting the right information from your staff. I just wanted to move on. I know this was a big topic of conversation at our last hearing, and I think it's still unresolved at this point. So I appreciate that your team sent me the redacted version of your internal investigation, and I did get a chance to read that. And then I know AFSCME has sent you a formal letter requesting the comprehensive investigation by a third party. In reading the two versions, there's a lot of discrepancies in here, like a lot of discrepancies. And in reading in the internal piece, it doesn't seem like, I mean, I had several concerns. One, it doesn't really seem like a root cause analysis. It seems like the scope of the investigation, again, in reading it, and it's possible I missed something, that it was looking at whether Agent Martinez did something wrong. It wasn't looking, it did not explicitly say we are looking at root cause issues that permeate the department. And then in addition to that, there are some places in here where it sort of makes it seem like, well, you know, maybe the agents didn't do what they were supposed to be doing, which again does not jive at all with what is in the report that AFSCME has sent to you in their letter. So I guess my pointed question to you is, if I see something that is completely different in two versions, why would we not want a third-party investigator that has no connection to either the union or to the agency to come in and give us a soup-to-nuts gold standard review of all of our actions to make sure if you were all in the clear, great, that'll come out. If, you know, the agents did something wrong, that'll come out. If we need to fix things, that'll come out. To me, that seems like the best place to reset with with levels of, we know where we should be starting from and what we should be improving. What is the problem with doing that?
So, sir, thank you for your comment. We have escalated us to the governor's office, and the governor's office has advised us that we will have resolve and answer to that after January 1. And we do have representation from the governor's office here today.
I guess I don't understand why you couldn't have made that decision on your own. It seems like you punted that one to the governor. The last question I have was really concerning to see this reported by WYPR, and would love an update on this, that because of the staffing vacancies, which obviously we've talked about, you all decided to cut the night shift on home visiting, which I just think is a glaring public safety issue. And so we obviously haven't gotten an update on that. Can you give us an update on? Okay.
Again, talking about, going back to the ideal, I believe, with labor relations is always to, if a problem arises, to come to us so we can have this conversation right away. I've actually personally spoke on the phone with the AFSCME representative that brought this to my attention today, and it's been resolved. The order to cut that night shift has been rescinded. It was a miscommunication on our behalf and is no longer valid. So I would call that resolved. And one of the things we're going to do is, as talked about during that quarterly community supervision LMC, you probably have it in your notes about December 4th, we're going to engage with AFSCME and have a conversation about scheduling.
Okay, when was that decision made to call off this policy?
About 2 hours ago, I think, is when I got the phone call.
When did it go into effect?
Immediately. The commissioner.
No, I mean, when did the policy take effect? The night shift policy, did it actually go into effect at all?
I don't believe it actually went into effect, and if it had.
I don't believe it was implemented. We found out about it this morning. Immediately, we contacted the Commissioner of Corrections that home detention comes under, and we gave direction to the director to rescind it, and the letter went out.
So a policy like this that has wide-ranging implications on public safety, not even internally in the agency, but potentially on the public citizens that we represent, when it was about to go into effect and your team didn't know about it, or excuse me, it did go into effect and you didn't know about it until labor
and that
said
goes
it to you?
back to, again, us holding that director accountable, because he was in that AFSCME meeting with us, and it was clear that we were going to have more discussion about that impact.
A radical policy change like this does not get run by your office before it actually takes effect, impacting the public?
Nor did it go to the Commissioner of Corrections.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Delegate. Just a point of clarification for the audit, so the independent audit, that decision it now resides with the governor. I just wanted to make clarification for the record on that. I lost the train on that.
Yes, sir. We had discussions about that, the request that came in, the official request that came. I had further discussion with the Deputy Chief of Staff that I report through for the governor's office. And after further analysis, the direction was that we will make a decision after January 1.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Delegate. We'll move on to Delegate Bartlett, and then we'll go Susan McComas, and then we'll go over to Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. I'm going to ask this for you all and as well as all witnesses that come forward. I want you to use your baseball game voices because I'm having a lot of trouble hearing. I'm trying to take notes and I can't always see the CC. So if you could just speak into the mic, it would be great.
Hey,
Okay.
So appreciate that. We have a new systems upgrade, and we're still working out the kinks on that, so thank you for pointing that out. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just getting started. Okay, so I wanted to, I'm going to leave the appropriations and budget and tax on the vacancy issue. I'm going to leave that to them. I will say, though, if I hear 43% vacancy and I hear that there you have the capacity for 180, is that correct? 180 for Agent 1, I'm sorry.
108.
108. Okay. So, I mean, I feel like I can do the math to understand what you need there. But, I mean, without you even having to give me a number, I can do the math and see, you know, what you would need if you wanted to be at full capacity.
Yes, I mean, we're aware of what the number of vacancies are, what the vacancy percent is, and I think as the Secretary stated earlier, we have 15 people starting in January, so take that number, cut it by 15, again, because the vacancy is based off of today.
Okay,
right?
And so I just didn't know if there was a different definition of vacancy that I was missing, but I get it, I get it. Okay, so my next question is, or next point, that wasn't a question, I apologize. This is my question. So what were the agents doing or are doing that have a zero caseload?
So good afternoon. I'm very happy to answer your question. In community supervision, our priorities are always to focus our resources on our highest risk individuals. Again, because at one time in our history as a department, our caseloads were extremely high in Baltimore City. And agents were spending an enormous amount of hours waiting for court hearings to be had. Because they were in court for such an extensive period of time, that meant that office contacts weren't getting done, community contacts weren't getting done. And so to remedy that at that time, we consolidated and worked with the courts in Baltimore City and consolidated into what's called a court liaison unit, which meant that you had a set of experienced agent seniors to represent all of those cases. So instead of having 20, 30 agents in a courtroom waiting for their cases to be called, you really just had about 2 or 3 agents assigned to the different courts within Baltimore City, and then you had the other 15 that can continue doing with their work in the field to keep their supervision on the highest risk population.
So zero caseload doesn't mean twiddling your thumbs. It doesn't mean you're just sitting around. It means that you're doing something. You don't have a caseload per se, but you have a duty, and your duty is to go into court.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. That makes sense because the zero caseload was bothering me. Those were actually my 2 points. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a quick question. I know that a lot of the law enforcement, they like to get certain credentials or accreditations, and I was wondering, is there an accreditation association for parole and probation that and if there are, or is there more than one, if you could tell us who they are?
So the Maryland Correctional Training Commission actually provides that training for both correctional officers and Division of Parole and Probation. One of the things that we are proud about as part of this realignment is that effective January, we are beginning a 40-hour accreditation training for those individuals that are agents within the division. That 40 hours includes both classroom training as well as defense tactics training and use of safety equipment.
But is there a national group that's kind of like the gold standard that they will come in and they will examine your organization and say, hey, you're accredited to the highest
National Parole
level?
and Probation.
There are accreditations through ACA.
American Correctional Association.
Yes, American Correctional Association.
HCA?
ACA.
American Correctional Association has standards.
Okay.
And also the American Parole and Probation Association, APPA, they just published their recommendation for standards, and their standards are expected to be adopted and implemented in June of this 25.
So they're already looking into Maryland's parole and probation the system?
No, they're not looking into it at this time.
They're looking into nationwide.
Oh, okay. So my question is there any type of agency that is an expert in your system of parole and probation that can come in and do a third-party investigation, which is kind of what I'm hearing our folks here are thinking about?
ACA already has that audit capability and the audit standards associated with that for accreditation. And again, as the director mentioned, with the Parole and Probation Association, that the guidelines are due to come out by June 30th. That will give us another avenue because there will be individuals associated with that can then do the same type of auditing.
So hypothetically, if that isn't soon enough, since we're waiting till June of 25, is there any agency that could come in and see what the bill of health is for the Department of Parole and Probation?
I think that's something I need to further explore because I'm not aware unless my director is coming from.
As far as another agency coming in, that's something that we could definitely explore. But I will tell you that one of the things that I have also shared with the union is what I would call key performance indicators or safety standards. And so we internally will be measuring our compliance with all of the safety protocols that we're putting into place. And again, those safety standards recommendations have also been shared with the union.
So do you feel that will take care of the concern that I'm kind of hearing from the committee that they're concerned about having a neutral third party look at things, if assuming maybe that the union is on a different track than the department?
So I think the third party is in reference to the tragedy that occurred. The compliance and the standards is another kind of internal looking at our business process. So it's maybe two tracks, if you will. That's what I'm understanding, that they're two different, their lenses looking at two different things.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Secretary, for your presentation. A couple of quick questions for you. One, can you tell me if and to what extent the Office of the Attorney General was engaged or became engaged in this particular incident?
So they've been engaged since day one. They were able to review the investigation. They provided any guidance associated with decisions that were made related to this investigation. We have a principal attorney that is assigned to us, and that attorney is fully engaged in everything associated with this incident.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, if I might. So with in conjunction with the after-action report of the incident, will the Attorney General's office be also offering a
Absolutely,
report as well.
absolutely.
Could you please also share that with us when you get it?
Yes, sir.
All right. Mr. Chairman, if I might, Madam Secretary, since this incident occurred, what type of services has the agency put forth to its members to ensure that psychologically that our folks are fit to provide the services that are necessary to our citizens? So if you could speak to that, as well as any type of policies that you have in place to ensure that periodically you have your finger on the pulse of where your agents are and your staff are in regards to their behavioral health.
So again, I will tell you that one of the things that we're happy that we are getting up and running is the employee wellness program. It was originally not a very robust program, but there was one within the department. We are working very closely. We most recently had a committee meeting, and we expanded that wellness committee to members of the union so that we could hear their concerns. And we have a director that is working in charge of that to ensure that we're able to address every aspect of employee wellness that we can. We reiterated by making sure that our employees are linked to Maryland Cares, which is at their fingertip. It's actually on their phones so that they can get immediate help when they need that. As well as, again, it's going back to a training of our staff to be more sensitive and to make sure that if there are employees that are in need, that they have that option also to refer them to employee assistance so that they can get the mental health and other mental health needs that they have so that we can ensure their safety and that they are able to be successful in what they do. So we're continuing to do that as well. And can you tell me the second part of your
Thank you.
question?
And if you could share that information regarding that matter with us as well. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary, obviously, for those of us who are in service of our community, there are obviously officer safety or agent safety trainings that occur, not only from the basic training, but also in-service trainings. So if you could speak to it and then as well share that information with us. And those trainings also, obviously, because you have your officers are in the communities, any types of trainings that you have for the staff that man those officers as well.
So one of the things that we found was that DPP had an abbreviated training, and much of it previously was a virtual training or a webinar. We did a pilot in December for the first class, but as I spoke before, effective January 1, there is going to be a full 40-hour training that includes everything from defense tactics to implicit bias to confrontational avoidance, so that they understand the whole gamut of first how they take care of themselves to ensure safety, and to also introduce them to policies about how that extended safety will be carried out throughout the department.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And Madam Secretary, I know we're giving you a lot of homework, but this is all for the better.
It's
and
okay.
That information as well, if you could get that to the committees.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Secretary, we've talked a lot about how to prevent this tragedy from happening in the future. Based on the work that your department handles, particularly on the correction side, you know, I hate to say it, but there will be future incidents in which our state employees are in harm's way and, God forbid, lose their lives in public service again. I'm particularly concerned about what happened in the hours and days after this incident occurred, particularly in your relationship with the union, the local president, the Silver Spring office. I am particularly, I'll use the word offended, that DBM denied PTO requests for the staffing in that office to have a colleague lose their life in service to the state and then be expected to show up to work the next day and the days after. I think we can handle it much better, is my point, and I'm curious if your office has just discussed a stronger protocol in conjunction with the union in case this ever happens again? How to handle ourselves better?
So thank you for that. Also, I think you're right. This is a dangerous job that we've all signed up to do, whether it is law enforcement, corrections, or agent that's out in the community. Our commitment is that we immediately saw fit to remove the leadership that was there because decisions that were being made were not being made in the best interest. But this new leadership that we have has a commitment to safety, and we will ensure that each and every person understands our commitment. The new director has had a chance to speak before you. I will say that when the event happened, we did give that office the opportunity to telework. Some chose to telework, others did. Some of them wanted to be together, and they came into the office because I was there a couple of times, out there at the Silver Spring office. I was there to check on them to see what was going on, and many of them wanted to come in. So it wasn't that we mandated them to come in. And if somebody did mandate them to come in, I'm clearly not aware of that because the direction from this office was to give them reprieve, to help them to heal. So they were allowed to work from their homes. We also immediately stopped those home visits because I didn't want anybody else going out there and this tragedy happen again. So while we continue to learn from maybe some of the challenges that occurred following this tragedy, I think we also continue to grow, and that we're going to continue to grow in this area, and we're going to implement best practices to ensure that this does not, and make sure that each and every employee is treated with dignity and respect.
With all due respect, you will not be in this position forever. Your deputies will not be in this position forever. I'm just challenging you to dig deep and learn from what went well and what did not go well in the days afterwards, and leave a written protocol, again, in conjunction with the union, to make sure that if this happens again, you have a plan that has been agreed upon with your employees. And so we could get through some of the insults to injury that might have occurred in the days after.
I am happy to put that on our LMC agenda and work with the union to get that done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to revisit something, and I appreciate my colleague bringing that up, because based off the last hearing, we knew that the local representative showed up to the office to man the phones for the people who were there in that office immediately afterwards. They were not confirmed that they could take time off, okay? So even if that did come from your office, it did not reach the frontline people, because the relief that was given to them was provided by their colleagues in line service showing up to just take the calls for them. And I really appreciate that approach, and that you saying that the days after you all continue to show, but the immediately after, I just want the record, because that was in our last convo, that it was their colleagues on the front line who did that.
May I comment? I'm sorry. That one of the reasons I know that we did this is because our federal partners at CSOSA, actually we work with them, and Dr. Abathir was actually one of them at that time. They volunteered to come and hold down the offices for us immediately, and they were there on site holding those offices down so that our staff was freed up in order to actually go through that grievance process and help and heal.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing that people came to help. What we're saying is that it was clear that folks weren't given the clear that they could leave, so their colleagues came and did it of their own. Maybe federal partners came and did it of their own too, which we appreciate. But I just wanted to set the record straight on that. But you representatives can come right behind you. We actually established that in the last hearing. I actually wasn't trying to dwell on that point. What I did want to go into is something on the wellness that my colleague, Senator Jackson, was talking about that maybe I heard wrong. I just want to clarify. The employee wellness program that you referenced, you said something that you all extended access to members who are part of the bargaining unit. Are you saying that the employee wellness program and the benefits that are in there were not accessible
So
to staff who are
excuse me,
part of an organized unit?
The Employee Wellness Program was out there part of DPSCS. And further exploring it, it appears that, again, DPP, previous leadership had not pushed it down to DPP. DOC was very much aware of it. They utilize it. So what we did was we expanded it to the bargaining unit on that side. My understanding and speaking with my director of community investment that is actually overseeing this wellness, as well as our nurse, our occupational health and safety nurse, is that they most recently had a meeting on wellness, and the bargaining unit for DPP was included in that, so that we can make sure they have a voice. But beyond that, even with the app that is on their phones, also on their phones is what's called Maryland Cares. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. And that's an immediate access. But the department, yes, it's continued to build and expand. And it goes back again to, we had to change the leadership, because I hear you. Information was not getting pushed down from this level to let the staff know that we hear them, we were appreciating them, and we needed them to do things in a certain manner with order and decency. So I know for sure that the order was given to allow those staff to telework when this tragedy happened, to be home if they needed to be home, or what type of leave we needed to use, if we needed to put them on administrative leave or whatever it was. We wanted to get them through this process.
Okay. I appreciate that. And the main clarity I was trying to make sure that I heard correctly was that we talk a lot about Department of Corrections side, particularly during budget season, all this going on there. I was just trying to clarify that access to the mental health care wasn't something that was available only for people who were non-members up until after this incident.
It's for everyone. It's always been available for everyone, and we continue to do a better job to ensure that everyone knows that it's for everyone.
Thank you. The other question I had.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, just to further clarify that. Not bargaining unit, right, just employees. I think we're talking about DPP versus DOC, not DPP bargaining versus non-bargaining.
So all employees have access to it?
Yeah, all employees have access. I think with the secretary, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think what she's conveying is that there was, while it was available to all employees, it wasn't necessarily being kind of pushed down, distributed, highlighted to Division of Parole and Probation employees as much as it was on the DOC side. The bargaining unit is irrelevant in this. All of our employees are largely bargained, and there's no discrepancy within the program as it relates to that.
It's my understanding that AFSCME and some of their members have been requesting some changes to the use of force policy in the home detention unit. Can we elaborate that a little bit of the status of that?
The plan is to have further talks with them. That use of force manual, the use of force continuum actually comes out of the Maryland PCTC. And so we're going to work alongside PCTC and with the union so that we can go through that manual and make sure that we have, it is either inclusive of what we already have to include DPP, or whether or not there is a need for a separate manual. That's something we're going to work very closely with them to explore.
Can we possibly get a timeline on that?
I don't have one on that, but I'll get one to you. I'll follow up with you on that.
Thank you. I think as we've proven, their needs are unique going into people's homes, not knowing the environment that they're going to walk into. And I love a timeline so that we can work together on that.
We're having ongoing discussions, and it's certainly a departmental priority.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry about the second bite at the apple here. Madam Secretary, have home visits resumed?
No, sir.
So I want to be clear on this. You came here almost 2 months ago before this committee, or this joint committee, and we asked you for explicit direction, control, whatever you want to call it, to give a heading on getting everything codified, put together, move forward with an azimuth for the entire department. And what I'm hearing you say is you've got nothing. You've got vests that people were being fitted today. You've got, and that was a last minute thing. That should have been the first call you made when you left here on the 24th. We've got home visits that haven't been resumed. So for the past 6 months, we have offenders in the community without any oversight, which is a danger. So your this inaction by you and your leadership is now becoming a public safety issue for the citizens, not just your agents, but the citizens as a whole, because we have no oversight over them. Sex offenders not being checked on, right?
That's not true. The sex offender, so what we did was, the previous interim director for DPP, Ms. Faulkner, before the director came, she is actually law enforcement. She is one of the commissioned police force within the division. And she took it upon herself. She is also a former DPP agent. She took it upon herself to ensure that any home visits that were mandated, she actually did them. She went out and she did those visits. She conducted them.
But you said you stopped all home visits.
We stopped all home visits, and then what I learned was there were some home visits that were mandated that we had to do. And that's when the director made sure that we were compliant with them. One of the other things that
Did you give her that direction, Madam Secretary?
She actually, as the interim director, made the recommendation.
And where's she at today?
She's back at her previous job.
So the person that took it upon themselves to continue to do.
And she is available. She still works very closely with Director Bethea. Director Bethea, I think, will tell you that. I think the other thing that I am trying to ensure that you hear from me is that as recent as yesterday, I actually have been having conversations prior with Colonel Butler of the Maryland State Police, and I'm happy to say that our partners in law enforcement, after meeting yesterday with the Sheriffs and Law Enforcement Association, are happy to partner with us now on home visits and go out with us. So we'll be working very closely with them.
Just for clarification, because I don't want to lose this thread, you said you stopped.
So the day
How long
of the
did they stop
incident.
before? I guess is my question.
They're stopped.
No, but you stopped all of them. For
The day of the
even-
incident, everything was stopped.
How long was everything stopped for?
Tell me when Bobby Joe went out.
They're still not happening.
Because,
You know when Bobby Joe went out?
I can tell you no sex offender in Frederick County has been checked on.
so that's what my point. Because
When Bobby Joe went out?
that's my point is.
Let us get that information, and I can tell you exactly how many visits Bobby Joe did and where she went. We will forward it to you.
The explicit question is how long did everything stop, including the mandatory requirements, the mandatory checks? Because if everything, that means everything, even the mandatory. And there's a pocket of time in which even the mandatory checks were stopped. And that's the answer, that's the question that I want the answer to explicitly.
I'll follow and get you that information.
No, I appreciate that, Mr. Chair. So you have one rogue agent that went and did them on her own, not at your direction, but because she understood that you guys had requirements to do. Is that correct?
I would not call her a rogue agent,
Okay.
but that's your interpretation.
She did checks without you knowing.
No, she made me aware that she was going to do them. She's law enforcement.
She's not law enforcement right now.
She is law enforcement right now.
Oh, she's a police officer?
She's part of our internal investigation union, and she is a commissioned police officer.
Okay, good. So she took it upon herself, and where is her office out of?
Out of Savage, Maryland.
And I can tell you that there's 40 sex offenders, minimum, in Frederick County that have not been checked up on since this all happened on May 31st. That's inexcusable. Part of the direction that this committee gave you and your team was to look at partnering up agents, was to look at other safety measures to keep them safe, not to just abscond with your responsibility to keep, in your capacity, the community safe. And you failed because we are not checking up on sex offenders, the biggest predators. As a matter of fact, it was a sex offender that took Agent Martinez's life. So the most violent of violent people, we have had now 6 months. And aside from Agent Faulkner, statewide, no checks. Is that correct?
I would offer that we will follow up with an answer with that for you with details associated with how
Madam
many were
Secretary,
done.
I heard that before from you on October 24th, and you know what answers I'm getting? That's privileged information. I don't have that. We'll get that to you later.
I didn't tell you that.
I'm
was public
asking you
information.
today, how many checks have your agents, under your direction, under your leadership, how many agents, aside from Agent Faulkner, who did it on her own because she realized it was mandatory, how many home visits on sex offenders, and I'll make it simple, on sex offenders have been done by parole and probation?
And I don't have that number in front of me right now, but I
said
am
you told them
happy
to
to
stop.
give you. I did tell them to stop, and I will repeat, sir, that the director, the interim director at that time, did make us aware that there were some that were mandatory and that she was going to go out and do them.
And that's what I said.
I would appreciate you to allow me to look into that information, and as part of our response to this committee, we will ensure you get detailed information on
I
that.
appreciate that, Madam Secretary. I'll close by saying this. You said that you have accountability, and your direction was to stop all home visits the day after Agent Martinez was killed. Is that correct?
The day that the agent was killed, I directed home visits to stop. You are correct.
Aside from Agent Faulkner, who cleared it with you, anybody else that would have done a home visit would have done it at their own demise and would have been violating your direct order. Is that correct?
It would have been violating the direct order.
So is it safe to say that there's been zero done because nobody's going to violate your direct order because you have accountability of your agents, zero done other than Agent Faulkner?
It's not safe to say that because I actually need to get the numbers for you from Agent Faulkner. And let me tell you why. Because Agent Faulkner also worked in partnership with some of her IID detectives that were willing, that actually the person that did the investigation was a previous DPP, that were willing to go out and help her.
I didn't ask you. I asked about your agents.
I
said, how
don't
many
want
of your agents have done home visits on sex offenders since this?
I have to find that information out for you. I can't give you an answer to a question that I don't have an answer to.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Rich. I want to recognize the chair of the House Judiciary Committee who joined us,
Clippinger.
Delegate Clippinger.
Apologize for being delayed, but I actually was in court where I may have ended up with 3 sentences that ended up putting people on probation. In any case, I'd like to recognize Delegate Bartlett, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question I had was with respect to when you give that number that Senator Folden was asking about, could you break it down a little bit farther to the individuals that are mandated to have home visits, and also whether or not any form of check-in has been done, maybe telephonically, maybe Zoom or whatever, so that we can get a clear picture on whether or not we have individuals who are going completely unaccounted for or not.
Thank you for that. Yes, we absolutely will. And I can tell you that there were virtual check-ins that were done as well as telephone check-ins continued. But we will get you those numbers.
Okay. And then I just wanted to review, because I had the question about the home visits as well. I wanted to review something that was mentioned in October, and I believe that the director made mention of it with Delegate McComas's question, and that is with respect to the American Parole and Probation National Standards. I have a note that it comes out the first quarter of 2025. Is it out already?
No, not my understanding.
I thought I heard something about standards were out in December.
I believe the
today.
draft is out, but I'll let the director speak to that.
The draft for comment was actually released in June of 2024. And so the draft for comment went out to all of the probation members of the association for comment. So that's what is actually been published. And so the recommendations have not been formally adopted at this time, and it's anticipated somewhere around June of 2025.
Oh, June, okay. So I have another note that says the correctional leadership standards would be out the first quarter of next year. Is that also in part of that?
I'm not familiar with the leadership standards that you speak of. If you could be a little bit more specific, I could look
I have
into.
to tell you, that's what's in my notes. I think I thought I was making a direct quote, but anyway, it was correctional leadership standards due first quarter of next year. I can follow up with that, with you all on that one.
And may I just answer your question in regards to the sex offender accountability?
Sure.
And so although the field work was suspended right after the tragic death of Agent Martinez, one of the things that we realized is that realized is that staff needed better equipment so that they can be safer in the field. And because we did not have that equipment, the field visits were suspended. We are in the process of retrieving that equipment, the multi-threat vest, which is both ballistic and puncture resistant, as well as the law enforcement grade OC spray, as well as collaboration with our law enforcement partners so that we can resume the home visits. Although the field contact was not being done, the office, the videos, the phone contacts have never ended. And so we have been in constant contact with every person that has a supervision responsibility unless we've had to issue a warrant where they have eluded or absconded supervision. And in those instances, we have been working with Captain Faulkner as well as with the warrant apprehension unit to search for those individuals before issuing our request for warrant.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have other questions. I'll follow up. I've written. Thank you.
Excellent. We'll make sure we get a synopsis of all the RFIs and submit them, a consolidated list to you all. So for the members, please remember to send those to us at the end of this hearing. For the delineation between mandatory and, and permissive, is that in reg or is that a statute?
And
Is that a regulation? Is that a statute?
Can you repeat your question? I could not hear you.
For the delineation of the list of mandatory checks and discretionary checks, is that in statute?
The mandatory checks are in statute.
Or is that regulation? Okay, so it's a statute.
Yeah,
Do you know which, I'll find it, but.
We'll send it to you as well.
All right. Senator Fulton.
Thank you. I guess I can ask the union when they come up, but I'm just, the secretary or your deputy secretary came up and was trying to explain away my concerns about these home visits by saying you guys are still doing this, you're doing that for safety. But you know what you're not doing? I don't hear you saying we're working with our law enforcement partners to do home visits because they have ability to have officers go with our agents into the home to ensure that our communities are safe from these sex offenders and predators. It's not what I heard you say. It's not what I heard your deputy secretary say. That's what we wanted to find was solutions. And I haven't heard any. I hear you having discussions, but you're not giving solutions.
So I guess, and I will try to be clearer. What I said to you was that I had been having previous discussions with the colonel of the Maryland State Police, the superintendent. We did reach out to him. I'm happy to say that we reached out to our partners in Montgomery County who were already on board to work with us. And our superintendent actually took it before the sheriffs and police, the association meeting yesterday, and that all of the counties and all of the law enforcement agencies are happy to work with us because they understand that it is a public safety issue. So as recent as yesterday, we had all of our law enforcement partners willing to work with our agents and go out on these visits.
Seems like there was a lot being done in the last 48 hours in your department about this hearing coming up. That was a discussion that was discussed on October 24th about law enforcement because the actual comment was made by me about the one difference between law enforcement and your agents is 100% of those that they come in contact with are offenders. Police don't even have that high of a number. They go into contact with other people. 100% of the people that they're required to check on are already post-conviction offenders. And we have not been checking up on them. And you've waited 2 months until yesterday to get all these people on board to resume these checks because by your own statement, you still haven't resumed them. And that fails our communities, that fails our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real quick, and maybe the two chairs or their aides could help too. Okay, so this was a unique situation where Agent Martinez was killed. And so you suspended the home visits, but at that point, was there an ability to trigger that you could at least maybe get them on home monitors? So that you could make sure that, that there was some mechanism that you wouldn't have to do home visits, until you figured out. In other words, is that something that if it's not available, if this ever happens again, that you can do that to put the, particularly the worst of the worst, which would be the sex offenders, that you want to make sure that they're not, patrolling the playgrounds. I just, so would it be a bill, or is it just need to go to AELR and put it in regulations or something?
And so for the global positioning monitoring that you're speaking of does require an order for them to be placed, a condition of supervision. Yes, we could have asked, for that. We did not at the time. And that's just.
So for clarification, so it needs to come from each judge for each defendant. Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, excellent. Further questions from the committee? We're going to keep.
If we're about, Madam Secretary, I think last time you were here, I think I called your agency's response to this tragedy woefully inadequate, and your responses at this hearing woefully inadequate. And unfortunately, I don't think we've moved the ball forward today. I'm not sure we can drag this committee back together again with session around the corner, but what I can promise you is that we will have a briefing in the first 2 weeks of session on the Appropriations Committee, where you can bring all the additional answers that you didn't have today. And then, as I've said, we will be moving your budget to full committee this year. So if we don't get the answers then, we can get it at full committee budget, and we're going to get there. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Further questions from the committee? All right, with that, thank you very much, Madam Secretary. Mr. Deputy Secretary, thank you. Who's coming up for the union, the representative for the union? Floor is yours. Welcome.
Good afternoon, senators and delegates. My name is Rainika Robinson, and I am the proud president of ASME Local 3661, representing the dedicated members of Maryland's community correction agencies. I am also a probation officer who takes immense pride in helping Maryland citizens seize a second chance by providing them resources to reduce their likelihood of reoffending. First, I want to thank you for your oversight, which has helped facilitate some progress in the form of baby steps. Since the last hearing, the department has committed to ordering upgraded vests that protect agents against not only bullets, but sharp objects, reviewing 9 policies for improvement, and ordering 100 tasers and body cameras, though they noted some legislative restrictions. While these steps are encouraging, they fall short of addressing the significant challenges we face. During a scheduled critical debrief on the tragic May 31st murder, we hope for a thorough review to identify and address deficiencies. Instead, Director Bethea informed us that she had not fully reviewed the murder, choosing instead to focus on the future. This approach ignores root causes. It's like installing safety features like sensors and cameras to prevent accidents caused by blown tires, addressing the symptoms while ignoring the underlying problem. Despite ongoing discussions, critical issues remain unsolved. Many field offices still lack armed guards, while existing contractual security staff fail to intervene in hostile situations, like on December 13th, where a sex offender tried to follow an agent to their car and another agent had to intervene, while security sat within arm's length and failed to act. Requests to meet with the office design team to address safety concerns remain unanswered. Training requirements have doubled, but resources for a training unit have not. Staffing shortages persist, with 17 offices lacking intake workers or secretaries. Across the state, there are agents answering phones and directing calls instead of typing warrants and meeting with clients. Caseloads are excessive, with Baltimore's drinking and driving monitors managing an average of 185 cases, and you have agents responsible for over 300 case files. We are overwhelmed and struggling to proactively engage with clients. It has been 7 months of mourning, and our members are still hurting and angry. We are tired of being told to look to the future without fully addressing the past. We are also deeply concerned about the lack of agreement on critical policies, such as the necessity of a use of force policy tailored to community corrections. Despite these frustrations, we remain cautiously optimistic. With your continued support and oversight, the dedication of additional resources, and the passing of the Davis-Martinez Act, which would increase accountability for employers like DPSCS to take our health and safety more seriously by engaging with us in preventative planning and training, we believe the department will be guided towards accountability, transparency, and a commitment to learn from the past mistakes while working with the union to take proactive steps towards keeping our members safe.
Thank you, President Robinson. My name is Denise Gilmore, and I'm the Legislative and Political Director with AFSCME Maryland. I want to begin by, again, acknowledging the Davis-Martinez family that is in the room. Their commitment to making sure that this tragic incident never happens again to a public servant here in Maryland is really inspiring, and I really want to acknowledge that. I also want to acknowledge the members that we have in the audience who have traveled here from the Silver Spring office where Davis-Martinez worked. There are two words that are really sticking with me right now. The first is accountability. I think we have zero confidence that we would even be discussing policies with the department right now if it weren't for the hearing that you all called back in October and the hearing that we have today. I think that's been evidenced by the fact that there really wasn't much movement in terms of policy discussions until after the hearing in October, 3 weeks ago. The secretary met with President Robinson and the local, and then yesterday in a flurry, we received many of the policies that we look forward to reviewing moving forward. But I want to be clear, that is not how this is supposed to work. We should be working, there should have been a serious incident review immediately after this incident where we were brought in to look at the root causes of this incident. And when we talk about making policy changes happening and collaborating with the union, it's not just sitting in a room and having a discussion. It's not doing a think tank meeting here with a group of folks. It is actually talking about, here is the policy, here are the union suggestions for how we can make changes. And I should mention that, look, Renika Robinson is a rank and file parole and probation agent. Her board are rank and file parole and probation agents. They're still doing this work. We should be able to pass back and forth our policy ideas and actually start to develop policies that we can implement and train folks on. We are eager to start this work. The other word that really sticks with me is resources. You know, the secretary mentioned by talking about, you know, the success that the Justice Reinvention Act had. Yes, But something that never happened with the JRA is we never appropriately upstaffed P&P. I just looked back at the at the budget for fiscal 13 right before we went into the JRA, and they were already at that point estimating about 1,200 additional folks that would be added as a result of the earned release efforts in justice reinvestment. But we never, in fact, there were years when pins went down in the Department of Parole and Probation after that. We didn't upstaff. So I don't want to hear a department boast about an 8% vacancy rate when the denominator isn't where it's supposed to be. I thank you for the commitment to oversight. Thank you for the commitment to keeping this department accountable. But I can't stress the urgency enough. It is not just in DPP. It is happening in corrections. Right before this hearing, I was informed that one of our correctional officers at the Jessup Correctional Institution last night was beaten unconscious. She is alert now. We've had more serious incidents in this department. We have serious incidents happening in other agencies right now. Something has got to give. The status quo isn't working, and we appreciate your help in trying to hold these agencies accountable to keeping our members safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you both very much for your testimony. We'll now switch over to questions from the committee. I see Senator Folden.
Yeah, if we can get the president up there. So thank you for coming. Thank you all for advocating for Agent Martinez and on behalf of his family and as well as the other agents across the state. So I just want to make sure that I'm not missing the mark here. So when we were here last time, was it your understanding that that there was going to be a collaborative effort to try to spearhead together with the Secretary's office to make meaningful changes and be prepared for this meeting?
Yes, that was my understanding.
Okay. The AAR, the after action review, did that come about with you guys?
There was a meeting, which they called a critical debrief, but the meeting was not to discuss what happened, the incident. They just wanted to talk about policies and procedures. I asked during that meeting if we could discuss what went wrong, because it's hard to develop policies if I don't understand exactly where the lapse was.
Sure.
And I was told that our director said she wanted to. Her goal was to focus on the future.
Yeah, and that's a part of, I guess, where some of my heartache is with this, is that it is critically important and invaluable to those that go out and still work to have a proper after-action review, critical incident debrief, whatever you want to call it. Because until we have that candid discussion, the meaningful change isn't going to come because we're like, oh, we're just going to look forward now. We're not going to worry about the tragic death of Agent Martinez. We're just going to look forward and hope that, well, it doesn't happen again. These discussions need to be had. And you're telling me that it wasn't that type of meeting to where that discussion was had. It was about looking forward and policy.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, that takes me away from my next questions, which was what came from it, because it doesn't sound like anything came from it because it wasn't an AAR. I find it, I'll use my good colleague's word there, woefully unacceptable that you got the policies yesterday for a hearing that's today to review.
Well, for a correction, I got the policies on December 10th.
10th, okay. All right, well, that's better than yesterday. When the whole night shift scheduling thing, that went into play, did that go into effect?
Yes, so it went into effect last night, and I found out about it this morning. So I did make a phone call because that wasn't what we agreed upon.
But the secretary said she didn't know that, she said it didn't go into effect, but you're saying that it did go into effect.
It did go into effect. I talked to staff from the night shift this morning who informed me that they were moved to a different shift and that it went into effect yesterday.
But the secretary didn't know, is what her answer was. Okay. Home visits, really, really, really critically important to your role. I mean, I just don't, I can't under-emphasize that. You guys are an extremely valuable partner with law enforcement in protecting our community. Have any, other than Captain Faulkner, have any of your agents done any home visits in person on any sex offenders across this state?
Not one agent has gone out to do any home visits since home visits were suspended.
And can we agree that it is not nearly the same to do a home visit via the net, like a Zoom link or on the phone? It's not as effective to see certain things that may be in place or occurring.
I think that we could definitely agree that there is a benefit of having a presence in the community.
Yes.
And going to, an offender's home and for them knowing that you could show up at their home.
It's about accountability.
Correct.
Right. Okay. And then I think I do have one final question, and it was brought up by the AFSCME rep. In your discussions, was there any discussions with the secretary about how many additional pins should be added to your parole and probation group?
So there weren't specific discussions around a number. We asked for additional pins. They provided us data that we then provided to the secretary, showing just like our office professional vacancies, and that we have the number of pins we have don't match our vacancy rate. The plan that I took away from the meeting is that they were going to look to possibly find voluntary transfers to try to move some staff around. They didn't commit or talk about specifically adding pins.
Because there were, I mean, I don't know, I guess it stopped, but there were agents doing admin duty.
There are still agents across the state that are absolutely doing admin duties, and they have to dedicate, there's agents dedicating 8 hours a week to admin duties.
So a whole day?
A whole day, yes.
And not doing their hired task of checking on offenders?
Well, they try their best to multitask, but it's really hard to answer the phone and do a visit at the same time.
I get it. All right. Look, I really appreciate y'all coming here, and thank the Silver Spring office for coming out here in support of your fellow officer. I do want to ask, I think there was a little discrepancy. Were the agents offered or told to go home following up the death of Martinez, or were they just backfilled with other agents?
The agents were expected to come to work that day, the next day. The agents were in the office. I had some of my colleagues even today that clarified they were told to come into the office on some of those days that they were teleworking as well. So it wasn't like just a response to just stay home. They were still expected to do their work.
So this is one of those occurrences, unfortunate occurrences, where it would be good to have, say, an SOP, like a standard operating procedure in place that says, hey, in the event that this happens, this is our checklist. This is something we're going to go to so that we know beyond one administration to the next to say, when this happens, this is how let's check down this list and make sure we've covered our bases. And that's not in place right now.
That is not in place.
Okay. Thank you for coming today. Thank you both.
Just also, there's a difference between PTO and telework. So telework is different. So do you get paid time off, or you got telework?
It was telework.
Yeah.
They were expected to work.
So that's
just from home.
Just, Senator Elfreth.
Thank you. To follow up on Senator Folden's question, line of questioning about at-home visits, and we fully appreciate this has to be a balance between the safety of your officers, but also the greater public good and public safety of the benefit of home visits. On the record, what are AFSCME's bright lines and standards? What needs to be accomplished and in place for your officers, your members to feel comfortable and safe returning to home visitation?
So that's like a really good question, and thank you for asking. I think our agents, first and foremost, want to understand what went wrong so that we could put safeguards in place to ensure that it never happens again. We want to ensure that there's technology that can keep track of us, because we saw that that didn't happen in this instance. We also want to make sure that there's actual policy, like welfare policies, that say like how often we're being checked on. Like the current policy that we have, it states that if you're going out to do home visits in the morning before 12, then you just have to call in the morning. That could, we could call in at 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock. We want real specifics because we just want to ensure that someone is checking on us. In addition to that, we do want the equipment, so we would like the vest. We would also like any other, equipment that we could have to keep us safe. And then, if it is taking law enforcement out, we would like that to happen as well.
Those sound very reasonable. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Two questions, and I think they're kind of connected in following that is, can you explain from you guys' perspective for the record, we kind of alluded to it earlier, but why do y'all feel the need for a third-party investigation, in your own words?
Yeah, so the investigation that was completed, as it was stated earlier, it focused primarily on what Agent Martinez did on the date. There were no questions about, well, did you check on him? Was there any technology issues? Was there a lapse in communication on maybe a supervisor was off and maybe that wasn't communicated? It seems like the agency focused in on Agent Martinez and his actions, but we run all of the actions because the only way we can move forward is by really knowing what happened so that we can build out around that to protect our agents.
Yeah. So you're talking about systems, as I understand.
Can you say that one more time? I'm so
You're talking about systems.
Yes.
Right, that led to it. Go ahead.
Yeah, if I can just add one thing to that, I think part of this too is, look, we want to move this over to the occupational safety and health realm a little bit. Admittedly, I think, yes, we talk about this in a labor management context, but we want to actually talk about this with occupational safety and health experts. And we have resources, certainly in the state at like our MOSH agency, right? That is an agency that could be consulted in coming in and coming up with, ideas to keep workers safe here. We have a, wealth of, resources at our universities here in Maryland. A lot of this really there's science behind how you keep employees safe at the work site, and it's doing the risk assessments. It's figuring out how to mitigate and eliminate those risks. It's training people. It's doing, a review. That's the type of, review that we would expect after a fatality in an agency. We would expect that, yeah, we would bring in some occupational safety and health experts and really figure out how we prevent this from happening in the future.
Which actually was my second question. In labor management conversations, has there been any conversation of bringing in MOSH, I believe that's the appropriate way to say it, to aid in this conversation?
There haven't been any conversations between us and management, but I have talked to MOSH. I do know that they are performing an investigation, which should be ready by January 31st.
Okay. I would love to read that once it's ready. Yeah. Thank you guys so much. And to the family, your state, we're so sorry for your loss. We appreciate your service. To all the frontline staff here, including your leadership, we want to be a partner. We want you to be safe. We want you to stay doing this work because in a lot of ways, when people return and 95+% of people who end up incarcerated return home, we need to make sure both you all are safe, but the community is safe. So thank you all.
Senator Jackson. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you for taking care of your colleague and their family. Look, I think one of the most important things you said earlier, and some of us, a couple of us, two of us have actually lived through this in our profession, is not knowing. That's the worst place to be. in the realm where there is an unknown. I asked earlier regarding the Office of the Attorney General, your agency has someone assigned there. Were you aware that they are conducting, they have a brief or a report that's coming?
Yes, I was aware, and I think I was promised a copy of the report.
That's good. Thank you. Secondly, just a check overall. How are the folks doing in the office? Did they take advantage of the health and wellness opportunities that are available to them? Even though it's been a while, it's never too far away. And how often do you all check on your folks?
Yeah, so that's another really good question. Mental health is something that we talk about at every one of our meetings. We've been asking the agency to get staff. We have social workers, but to hire some social workers or staff dedicated to making sure we have a mental health friendly approach when we're debriefing and dealing with issues like this with staff. I know that a lot of staff still are very confused, hurt, and angry. I think staff are still having a hard time processing this tragedy, especially because there haven't been debriefs with staff into what happened, and we really don't have a clear picture of like where we're going to go moving forward. So I think, you know, right now staff are still hurting and trying to be hopeful at the same time.
So you mentioned there, Mr. Chairman, if you mentioned that there has not been a debriefing with staff.
Correct.
Has there been a request for that? And as recent as when?
So we've met with the agency multiple times and we've made the request. The most recent request, well, so we had like a December 10th, that was with the union. And at that point, we again said that we are still looking to have a debrief. And as far as like debriefing with staff, we talked about that at our Labor Management Committee meeting, which was on November 25th.
So last thing I'll say is this, take care of the folks who are still struggling, but don't assume that they're okay, all right? Because if they can't function, then we don't get the service. We don't need any more tragedies. So, all right, thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Chair and President Robinson, thank you for those answers. I really appreciate what you said about through OSHA, almost through an OSHA perspective. One thing that I'm not hearing. Well, let me ask it this way: the standards that I was talking about earlier, that are coming out in the first quarter, are there past standards that existed perhaps for 2024 or 2023 that you're aware of?
So I'm not familiar with the standards that the department was speaking about.
Okay, thanks. And then my other question is, how long was the meeting on December 10th?
It was actually a long meeting. I think we were there from 2 until almost 5 o'clock.
Okay, so about 3 hours. Okay. And so that was one. I think you said another one in November?
I'm sorry. The meeting on December 10th was maybe like 30 minutes.
Okay.
I was referring to the meeting on December 4th. Okay. I'm sorry.
All right. So there was another one in November, right?
Yes.
And about how long was that one?
About 2 hours.
Okay. So while there has been some movement, and you acknowledged that in the beginning, there seems to be some really direct and specific things that you're looking for. And you've put them on the record now. We've heard them. The agency has heard them. I can assure you that we will try to follow up to get more of this information, because it is important that you do know what happened. One thing that I'm not sure I've gotten the answer to, and maybe, and I want to ask if you've gotten the answer to, and I didn't ask this, I forgot to ask it, is why did it take so long for someone to check on Agent Martinez? I wasn't sure what was going on in that timeline.
Yeah, so that's the question that we continue to ask the agency, and they do not have an answer for that question.
Okay, and so I'll follow up on that question myself, and if I get anything of interest, I'll share it. But the other thing is, you were speaking about a different third party to do an investigation. I think that is an important point, but I need you to kind of drill that down just a little bit more. Would that be unprecedented? Is there someone who's done that type of work before? I know you mentioned MOSHA, but you were given an acronym that I'm not familiar with. Can you tell me what that is? There you go. Don't push it.
I'm sorry. There we go. We have some precedent in the state with this, unfortunately. Under the, thinking back in 2012, there were a series of tragic patient murders that happened at one of our state facilities. One of the responses to that was consulting. And look, I give the, at this point, it was the, Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. I give them, credit. They immediately consulted a health and safety expert. She worked at the University of Maryland at the time and helped, we brought the union together, we brought management together and helped develop a workplace violence prevention plan that was based on work that has been done in other states and the research on how we prevent these type of events. It worked for 3 years. We saw some pretty impressive decreases in the incidents in violence. I think it is that type of commitment that we would hope to see here again. If we're bringing in expertise, let's bring in expertise on how we prevent these incidents from happening ideally, not to investigate, who did what wrong. We would really like to be prevention minded.
Okay, I get that. I think that's good. I wanted that on the record so that we could get a clear, because if the meetings that you are having are not resulting in the, in a full communication or exchange of what you need, then it is important to get it all here so that we can also follow up with, some of those needs that you have, some of those needs that the agency have, and hopefully get to a point of safety and for the agents, but as well as for public safety that Senator Folden was speaking of as well. So, that's how I see our job in this. And tell me what MOSHA is one more time.
It's the Maryland Occupational Safety and Health Agency. They're under the Department of Labor.
Okay, so it's the OSHA, it's the federal, we have the federal OSHA and then we have the state MOSHA. I got it. Yep, that makes sense to me. Thank you very much.
Further questions from the committee? All right, thank you all very much. Thank you. Any further witnesses? All right, any last comments, saved rounds? All right, thank you all very much. This will conclude the hearing. This is the second one. As the chair mentioned, I know that you'll be taking some further action in the House.
I think the Judiciary Committee will be joining the Appropriations Committee in the second week of session.
All right, so stay tuned for that, and we'll have some action here in the Senate as well, but we'll follow up to be determined and announced. Thank you all very much.